By the way, I want to get back to, not right now, but before I forget, on Tran,
Yeah.
right? So I pulled it up.
Good.
So what I pulled up, what happened, because I'm like, did I miss something? So what you're thinking of, I think what you're thinking of when they said he can't talk to his staff anymore, it has to be by email, all that stuff. That was the Senate Committee on Ethics. That wasn't state ethics.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're correct. You're
Yeah,
absolutely
Cronin missed it too, evidently,
correct.
because
I misquoted that.
Cronin was throwing things like, I'm looking at his use, like, he's like stealing from an old lady. He used the word stealing, I believe, and then he used the word crime. But I'm not defaming anybody, he said. So I'm looking at, I'm like, did I miss something?
Those
Maybe I
charges
did.
were brought against him by the Fitchburg Police Department. That's a totally separate issue.
But here's another thing. Cronin used the word convicted. He used that word, and it's like, in Tran, to his credit, I mean, Tran's demeanor is unbelievable. He sits there. He's got like nerves of steel, I think, probably because of his background. I mean, he came over as an immigrant on a wooden ship where people were freaking dying coming over from Vietnam. I mean, the guy's as tough as nails, right? And he's sitting there as calm as can be, and he's getting attacked. His character's getting attacked. His morals are getting attacked by Cronin. It wouldn't stop. And he's sitting there as calm as can be, right? Cronin, even like a little baby, says, please refer to me as Mr. Cronin instead of Candidate Cronin. I'm like, what's wrong with Candidate Cronin? I mean, it's good to be a candidate. I mean, I'd be proud to be a candidate. People don't have the balls to throw their hat in the ring to be a candidate. And he's calling you a candidate. You're like, call me Mr. It's like you're going to your father's, your friend's house, and your father comes out in his bathrobe and slippers and in the middle of the night with eating Ritz crackers with peanut butter all over his face. Says, oh, hi, Mr. Jones. How you doing, Mr. Jones? You get peanut butter all over your face. But anyways, so that was only the Senate Committee on Ethics, and what Tran was talking about was that he didn't even get it, and I don't know anything about it other than what I read. And Tran's like, it was political partisans that were going against him. He didn't get any chance to do his own investigation. He didn't get whatever he was saying. I think he didn't get to confront the witnesses. He didn't even know who was saying what about him. It was like this, sounded like a kangaroo court production over there at the Senate. And I think, so this Committee on Ethics, right? This is the Committee on Ethics that everybody thinks Tran got convicted of. And there's like 5 people on it. Let me see. There's like,
well, there, and to be fair,
7 people on it. And I think they're all,
it's convened on a necessary basis, correct? So when when they need to convene a Senate ethics inquiry, they hand select a small number of senators to do that, right? As they need.
I don't know how they did it, but I think there was one or two. When you say it was bipartisan, there's 7 of them, first of all, which is a small group. And I think there was one, don't hold me to it, maybe 1 Republican. So it's bipartisan.
Well, the problem is there's only what, 9 Republican senators, or how many Republican senators in the entire Senate?
I think there's 4 now, isn't there?
Oh, there's even less than, I don't know.
I don't know. There's not many.
I cannot tell you.
So here's the thing. In all fairness to Tran, it's like, I think they're still investigating it. The Ethics Commission is. So he hasn't been convicted of anything. You know, so this little committee, this little Senate committee slapped him on the hand and took away his committee assignments and all that stuff. But that's just the Senate, right?
I think my conclusion from the whole thing is, I have specific reasons why I'm disappointed in Dean Tran. They don't have anything to do with the ethics investigation or anything of that nature. They have to do with basically, you know, directly working with his office and trying to get help. At the same time, though, I've read.
I agree, but let's be fair about the process, right?
Well, no, right.
We shouldn't be convicting the guy and saying that he's guilty before he's even had a chance to defend himself. That's what burns my ass, that kind of stuff. Right. But, you know, some of the stuff
because it turns into a media development. Now, on Cronin's side, there's certain policy stances that he takes that I can appreciate and I can wrap my head around as a voter, and I'd want to vote for him. I just wish, and the state Senate race for us is not the only place where I've seen this, and have a problem with it. and I have a problem with both Republicans and Democrats doing this right now, which is in the context of the race, no one's really getting right down to the nitty gritty of the real policy issues. Really, truly prove to me that you have a deep knowledge of the policy stance that you want to take. Don't tell me why in 5 words if it takes more than 5 words. Like, try me. That's my basic attitude as a voter is I'm hungry. Try me. Give it to me. And I just don't see a lot of people. And they're outside of our district. I've seen one candidate this year that I've had an in-depth conversation with, because as you know, Cam and I do another podcast and we interview a number of politicians as part of that podcast. And I've seen one that's really come out and said, actually, no, I give that back. Two that have come out. One's a Republican and one's a Democrat it's clear that they have thought out policy stances. They have specific projects they may want to work on. In other cases, they have fully fleshed out, on paper, if I get the opportunity to propose a piece of legislation, this is what it would look like. This is what it would look like if I had to put it into a larger bill. You just don't see much of that. And that's really the real problem, because if we did, in one sense, voting would become a lot more confused in that it couldn't be just as simple as, I think I'm going to vote D right across the board. The national, position of the country is a disaster. I'm just going to vote this way. Okay, but who are you voting for? Because the farther down ticket you get, the more those people have a direct influence on your life, even though people don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Right? Like you really, really want to know the legislative prowess and the legislative ideas for your mayor or your city councilor. And a close second to that, you really want to know what your state senator and your state rep, what they really want to do.
Exactly.
What do you think? I have a question for you. For you about this. What do you think about the notion? Because I've heard this a lot in our state rep race. I've had people say to me, I'm not going to vote for Bruce Chester because he's new. I'm going to vote for John because John's just getting to an amount of time in that position where he can start to have influence and he'll start to rise up. And they make the claim that the singular reason, the singular problem for Gardner in the state legislature is that we got to go back to the old days and we got to have a rep that's been in there for 20 years. Because once somebody's been in there for 20 years, then they can start to move their weight around and get what they need for the district. I find that to be not only an extremely cynical kind of politics, but more operatively, I find it to be naive and frankly, it's just stupid. I mean, so that would mean that everyone has to sit in their seat for 20 years, consistently being reelected. Like what arbitrary time at what point can we say this person's never going to work out? They're never going to do what we need them to do. And since when is somebody becoming a bully in the state legislature good for anybody?
Yeah, well, welcome to politics, though, because there's a lot to be said for exactly what you said about Zlotnick being in there for 8 years, and he's going to be, if he wins, he'll be in there for another 10 years. Look at Representative Brewer when he was here. I think he was out the Berry Way or whatnot. Steve Brewer.
Yeah, sure.
He became chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. So his district got earmarks and money that other districts weren't getting. He was getting money for buildings. He was getting all kinds of stuff because he was in there forever, right? So that's how politics works. The longer you stay in, the more better committees you get, the more power you get. That's the way politics works. So there's a lot to be said for that. And it is cynical, but that's the way it works, right? That's the way it works. If Chester gets elected, he's not going to get any committees. He's not going to get anything. He won't get crap up there because it's the good old boy network up there. We all know about the good old boy network. That's how it works. And now we can say good old girls too, but they say good old boy network because it started out when women couldn't even vote. But you know what I mean? It's like the connections are everything up there. The connections on the inside of the Capitol building it means everything. That's where the money's going to come from. The government takes our money by force, and the money all ends up in Beacon Hill, and then these people that we elect, they decide to divvy it up, and who gets what. So if somebody's been around Steve Brewer's been in there for 25 years and he's chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who do you think's going to get the money? It's just the way it works. You know? How are you going to change that? Get rid of everybody, term limits.
I just don't know what to say.
Term limits. I mean, it's just.
I hear what you're saying. Yeah, term limits is definitely one.
But that has problems. It's just the nature of the beast. That's how government works. That's why we call DC the swamp. You get lobbyists. Lobbyists say who's going to get elected. The people. You look at Markey. He's been in there for 44 years. Biden was in there for 44 years. People are in there forever because of the lobbyists. Let's face it. It's the way it works in DC. In Boston's, similar to that.
Speaking of national politics, so I am a regular reader of the morning essays and articles written by Heather Cox Richardson, the Boston College historian, and there's a piece of what she wrote. So what she does, for those that don't know, she sort of encapsulates the day's news and gives it the following day. So she wrote this for the 27th, for Tuesday, but it's from the news on the 26th of October. And one of the things that she points to, I have a deep concern for this, is after talking a little bit about the big national news Monday was Amy Coney Barrett being sworn in for the Supreme Court. Sorry. But then she goes on to talk about Justice Kavanaugh bringing up. Well, I'll read it, and that'll get us into the specific thing I want to talk about. It has to do with Wisconsin and Wisconsin Supreme Court. The significance of Barrett's elevation to the court showed just minutes before the Senate confirmed her, when the Supreme Court ruled. So it's a Supreme Court ruling that occurred on Monday, when the Supreme Court ruled 5-3. I'm sorry?
It's a Pennsylvania case, right?
No, it's a Wisconsin case.
Oh.
Supreme Court ruled 5-3 for Wisconsin Republicans who want to block the counting of votes postmarked before Election Day, but received up to 6 days after it. Democrats and civil rights groups wanted the extension because of the pandemic. For this year's primary in Wisconsin, 80,000 ballots postmarked in time arrived after the election were counted. For the election, such late ballots will be rejected. The court's decision follows originalist ideology. It says states get to run elections however its legislators wish. That principle trumps the right to vote. Later on, in another paragraph, she said, in a footnote, Justice Kavanaugh went further to argue that states need to avoid, quote, the chaos and suspicions of impropriety that can ensue if thousands of absentee ballots flow in after Election Day and potentially flip the results of the election. And those states also want to be able to definitely announce the results of the election on election night or as soon as possible thereafter. This is the argument Trump has been making to delegitimize mail-in ballots, and it is political, not judicial. Absentee ballots do not flip an election. They are, in fact, a legitimate part of an election that cannot be decided until they are counted. And the idea of calling an election on the night it is held is a tick of the media. In fact, no state certifies its election results the day of the election. Some take weeks. Now, that's all true. The fact that that the certification of election often takes a lot longer than after Election Day. In fact, it almost certainly always does. And that there's nothing legal that ever has said, nor traditional, that says that the definitive calling of an election occurs or has to occur the night of the election. My issue with this is, regardless of who wins, it doesn't always have to be, my guy or my gal that wins an election. I firmly believe in as much access to being able to vote as possible. It doesn't mean that I think that non-citizens should be able to vote or anything like that, but I absolutely believe in making it as easy as possible for U.S. citizens to vote in U.S. elections. I think that the idea of all of this early absentee balloting, early voting, etc. I have absolutely no problem with. In fact, I think in the history of our country, making voting more difficult has always been about keeping working class people from voting if they can. And I'm just wondering what you think about all this. I mean, it's pretty disappointing that in Wisconsin, people who sent in their ballots in a mail-in vote, thinking that those ballots were A, getting in on time, which they have according to dates, and B, that they would be counted, and they should have their votes counted.
I don't know the case. Are you saying that even though they received the ballots already, they're not going to count them?
The state has received 80,000 early voting ballots.
Yeah.
That were postmarked in time according to the directions they gave to the voters who sent them in. And the state of Wisconsin sued to the Supreme Court in order to ask that these ballots not be counted. I'm just reading here, going back to, let's see, they don't want to count, the 80,000 were postmarked before Election Day, but some of them will be received up to 6 days after Election Day.
Oh, so they're talking about the ones that they're going to receive 6 days or more after the election, right?
Well, they were placed in, they're worried about ones that are placed in the mail. They're postmarked on time before Election Day, but because of the mail, they estimate that around 80,000 ballots will be coming in after. They're postmarked in time, but they're going to come in to be counted within 6 days after next Tuesday.
Well, I agree with you on making the process of voting as easy as possible, but there has to be safeguards too, as in terms of, we got to know who the person is to make sure one person gets one vote. So we've seen a lot of, we've seen some examples of like tons of ballots in somebody's car. We've seen ballots thrown on the side of the road in ditches. So that gives everybody the sense that, whoa, what the heck's going on out there, right? So I agree with you that, and I don't even understand the concern about mail-in ballots and write-in ballots, absentee ballots and write-in ballots. It's like, I don't really understand the concern on that. I mean, why should the Republicans be concerned? Maybe all the Republicans are doing that. Maybe there's going to be more Republican votes in that form. I don't know. And
well, here's the thing: if you go back to the more recent history regarding mail-in ballots, I mean, they've been around forever. Okay, it's not just a recent thing, but recently being in the last 20, 25 years, the resurgence, if you want to call it that, in mail-in ballots was really a Republican thing, because at the time when particularly Republican apparatus in the South wanted more votes, they knew that if they emphasized mail-in balloting, more older people could vote, and the older people in their districts, these were federal congressional districts, skewed Republican. And here we are, and our own president of the United States has been in various ways muddying the waters about the validity and the accuracy of mail-in voting, even though he does it himself. Because apparently maybe on the inside, the RNC feels that the tables are turned and that mail-in balloting isn't such a good thing for them anymore.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Confidence. If you are a legitimate party and you're putting out a legitimate platform, which the Republicans have not this year, there's no platform. It's whatever Mr. Trump wants. Okay, well then, but you should have confidence in your apparatus and in your platform and say, let's make it as easy to vote as possible, and let's do everything we can to win those votes. And anything outside of that just doesn't feel like it's a tradition of the United States, certainly.
Well, this is because of COVID. I think this year is different in that we're allowing more mail-in ballots than we ever have. There's only a few states that allow it, I think, as a general regulation. I think there's only a few. Everybody does absentee ballots, but we're doing absentee ballots and mail-in ballots now.
Well, wait, absentee ballots and mail-in ballots are the same thing, are they not?
I don't think so. Are they?
Cam, you're gonna have to look that
I
up
guess
for us
I
next time.
guess so. I mean, I don't know what the distinction would be,
We're gonna have our
but
producer Cam look it up.
it,
I
it seemed
think
like
they're
in
the
the
same.
past people would
They're
do
the
an
same thing.
absentee ballots if they were like in college or they were in the service or they were gonna be on vacation or something. They do an absentee
But
ballot.
that process allows them.
Now everybody's doing
They get a
mail-in ballots.
ballot. They get a ballot well in time for the election that they mail in. It's the same process of what we've been doing. You know,
I think the
during the
absentee
primary.
ballot though, it actually comes to you with your name on it. The absentee ballot. It's not
Well,
like this blank mail-in ballot like they're doing now.
okay,
Absentee is like, to use the word, earmarked to you.
I got
You
it.
get it in the mail with your name on it. You fill it out and you mail it back in, and the ballot has your name on it, I think.
Okay.
I think it's specific. But anyways, I'm with you. It shouldn't be a cumbersome process. And I don't know why the Republicans are afraid of mail-in ballots. That might even help them. I really
It's
don't get it. But
almost as if the demographics of the country have changed.
although
And
when you say 95% of when you say the working class people are usually the ones that feel the brunt of cumbersome voting regulations, but 95% of the people in the country are working class people, or 99.
well, right. So the majority of people are right. But when you, so what here's a direct example. In the this has happened off and on in the entirety of the history of the United States of America, where election day in certain places you restrict the number of polling places. You change the polling places relatively at last minute, or reduce the number of them. You reduce the hours that certain polling places will be open, and they happen to be open during hours where the majority of working class people have to work, and it's not so easy to get the time off. Things like that. I mean,
That can happen. Those things have happened, but I don't think that's happening.
I'm
That
not
hasn't
saying that's
happened.
happening today, although I do wonder. I've been hearing multiple statistics in multiple sources of media that the average. I was, in fact, this morning I was listening to the United States of Anxiety. It's a podcast, and the statistic was that right now in all of this early voting, the average wait for a suburban resident has a white resident is 6.5 minutes, and the average wait for a suburban African American resident has been 60 minutes or more.
Suburban?
Right. So what they're saying is
urban?
So two different racial backgrounds, but hailing from the same type of community, same socioeconomics and same population density.
So my question would be,
because it'd be easy
who's
to
running
say
the
if you're in a
government?
city versus a small town.
Well, I would say who's running
less time.
Who's running the government, and who in the government is controlling the voting booths? Because if you go to the big cities, it's all Democrat run. So they say, oh, look at the black sections of the cities, they have to wait forever. Well, you got a Democrat mayor, you got a Democrat governor. Why don't they do something about it?
Well, conversely, in the state of Texas, where there's one ballot box per county, that's going to affect the entire state, right? Now, that's clearly a tactic of limiting people's access to making it easy to vote. You're not saying you can't vote, you're just making it hard, and that's going to affect both white, black, other brown-skinned people, rich, poor. I mean, because it's every county in the state of Texas.
I don't know what the philosophy would be behind that, other than they want to have a control of the ballots after they cast, and they don't want them spread all over the place. Because I don't know.
I'm not going to give them that much of a pass. I'm going to say that it's to actually make it harder to vote.
Why would they want to do that?
Because less democracy, they have the feeling that less democracy means their guy's going to win.
I don't know. That's a cynical view.
Well, but it's not cynical. It's based on history. I mean, Tammany Hall.
Well, no, I mean
the Boston Irish vote, Honey Fitz.
I know. We could also say women couldn't vote. about
Yeah,
100
women
years
couldn't
ago.
vote. If we go back far enough, there was a
But
time when you had to have enough land in order to be able to
there's,
vote.
there's been constitutional amendments since then. So, I mean, we can't go back to Tammany Hall. You know, I don't know about, it just seems to me that if there's not enough polling places, I haven't seen, I know there's a lot of complaints that you read in the liberal press about that, but I did some research on it, and I remember there was one, I forget if maybe it was Kentucky or something. There was a primary going on, a Democratic primary, and people were complaining, look at this, Trump would love this one. There's only one polling place, and they're putting it in the neighborhood. There was a white woman running against a black man, both Democrats, for a primary, and they were blaming the Republicans for setting up this polling place in the black man's district, only one of them, whereas the white woman's district had more, or it was easier to vote, and they were trying to say that was because the Republicans were trying to slant the election, and they were both Democrats. It was a Democratic Party that was doing it. And I had to point that out to some people, but it was like, I mean, so a lot of these things you have to look into it and say, who's reporting it? You got to do your own independent research to see if there's any facts behind it, because every case is different. I mean, you can't just paint it with a broad brush and say, oh, look, you know, they're trying to get it, they're trying to sway it so that the poor people can't vote. I mean, yeah, that happens, but I don't think it's so broad that we can just say that that's happening across the country. You got to look at every situation and do the research as to what's going on in that particular location, I think.
Right.
Just like that case. So you have to tell me the name of that case, that Kavanaugh, that you quoted Kavanaugh on, because that's something fishy there.
Yeah, well, it's
Do you know the name of it?
No, I don't have the name of it, but
But it
Cam,
was
Cam, record that too if you can
Wisconsin.
look up,
I'll
because
find it.
it's a case that came out of Wisconsin, and our Supreme Court, our federal Supreme Court, voted on it on Monday.
Okay.
Court ruled 5-3. So, Cam, you could also look it up, because we'll include that on the webpage when you send it to me. We're about all kinds of facts and solid advice, Scott J. Graves, for our listeners. You know, keep researching, and just because you found it in one or two places, keep finding it in more places, and find the different sides of the story, if there's at least two different sides or more, and then sort of, you know, chew on that for a while, and then over time you'll come to your own conclusions, right?
Yeah, and I wanted
Like
to
for
tell you
finding a fine bourbon, it takes time.
there you go. Just like the one that's behind you, I think, in the picture behind you.
That's a big one behind me. That's a huge one.
I want to give you this example about doing research on Google. Okay, Google's the oligarchy. I think it's the search engine that people use for 96 or 97% of the searches in the United States or the world. So anyways, I wanted to look into the hypocrisy that you see in Washington, D.C. when the House of Representatives was doing the impeachment inquiry, and then when the Senate was doing the impeachment trial, right? So I wanted to see what the Democrats were saying when they wouldn't let Trump have these witnesses, and he didn't have the right to confront, he didn't get to see the deposition testimonies. So in other words, the House was making the rules because the House is democratically controlled. So they got to make the rules. And so I did a search saying House of Representatives rules, impeachment inquiry, Trump, inability to confront witnesses. I did the search, and so a bunch of stuff came up. But what came up was all the Senate stuff. Senate makes their own rules. Senate won't call witnesses. No, it's unbelievable. And I did it again. I made it more specific. No, House of Representatives, impeachment inquiry, Trump. And I tried all different ways. And every time I did the search, like the first 3 pages on Google were all Senate, how bad the Senate was about not calling witnesses. And the Senate it's unfair for the Senate to make the rules. And it was like, and whatever side you take, but I'm like, I'm not looking for the Senate part of I wasn't looking for the impeachment trial. I was looking for the impeachment inquiry. But it's like, so when you're doing your own research, you can't even go to like the first 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 pages. You got to dig deep. Like, I think I had to go 4 or 5 pages before I found, try it. Before you find one article about what the House of Representatives
Oh,
did.
and this is a whole other podcast in and of itself. The issue behind internet searches, search engines, the way that information is disseminated, the way it's cataloged, the way sometimes it definitely it smells of manipulation.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Yeah,
it absolutely does.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hate to cut us short because we could go all night, but we've got to get to bed so we can wake up bright and early and prepare this production to go live for all the people to hear. Scott J. Graves, it's been a real pleasure once again.
Yes, Scott.
My Thursday night in your legal office.
Yes.
And you in my parlor.
Yeah, I have to get one of those behind me.
I just sent one to you, man.
Okay.
We gotta get it up on there. We'll teach you how to put your virtual background on.
All right, cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've listened to another exciting Scott's on the Rocks Politica podcast. Good night.
See you later.